Jeff Beck spent decades as the guitarist other guitarists studied in silence. Almost nothing passed his filter. These 6 albums are what did.
It's hard to describe what that music did to me, and the melody being so strong and the musicality of it.
Number 6, Les Paul, The Legend and the Legacy. Most guitarists have heroes. Jeff Beck had one he never stopped talking about. Les Paul did not just play the guitar, he rebuilt it from the ground up. He invented overdubbing, multi-track recording, and a tone so clean it still sounds modern today. Every studio trick on a modern record traces a line back to his workbench. What he built was not just a technique, it was a language. A language every serious guitarist eventually has to learn if they want to understand where the instrument actually came from. Beck once said, "Les Paul was the beginning of everything for me." That is not flattery, that is a statement of lineage. Beck understood that the electric guitar, as a creative tool, only exists because Les Paul refused to accept its limitations. He layered sounds on top of each other before anyone had a name for what he was doing, creating texture and depth at a time when most recordings were simply trying to capture a performance faithfully.
Mr. Sandman, bring me a...
The Legend and the Legacy captures Paul at his most inventive, a musician who treated the studio as an instrument, not a room. Beck returned to it repeatedly, holding it up as proof that technical innovation and deep feeling are not opposites. That combination, ingenuity and soul running side by side, is exactly what Beck chased his entire career, and he said he first heard it here. Number 5, Stevie Wonder, Talking Book, 1972. Stevie Wonder walks into the studio with total creative control for the first time in his life. What comes out the other side is not a pop record, it is a statement. Talking Book opens with, "You are the sunshine of my life," a song so warm it practically has a temperature, and then turns immediately into something harder, deeper, and completely unafraid. Wonder pivots. He challenges. He refuses to let the record settle into comfort when there is still something urgent left to say. That refusal is what separates a great album from a merely good one. Jeff Beck did not just admire this album, he played on it. His guitar appears on "Lookin' for Another Pure Love," and the pairing makes obvious sense. 2 players who treat melody as a living thing, never fixed, always reaching. Beck described Wonder during this period as operating on a completely different frequency from everyone else. The vision was locked, and yet nothing on this record sounds calculated or cold. It breathes, it bends, it moves the way only music made from genuine conviction moves. Wonder wrote, produced, and played much of the album himself, handling multiple instruments with a fluency that made collaborators feel less like contributors and more like witnesses. The album reached number 3 on the Billboard 200 and launched a run of Wonder Records critics still struggled to rank against each other. Beck called it visionary, and he was not wrong. A record that proved genius does not need permission. If you want to test how well you know Jeff Beck and the music that shaped him, there is a full quiz linked in the description. Go check it out. Number 4, Jimi Hendrix, Are You Experienced? There is a before and an after. This album is the line between them. Are You Experienced arrived in 1967 and immediately made everything before it sound slightly smaller. Hendrix used feedback, sustain, and whammy bar manipulation as compositional tools, not effects, tools. The instrument became something else in his hands. He was not decorating songs, he was constructing entire sonic environments from a single guitar and an amplifier pushed past the point where most players would have pulled back. Jeff Beck watched it happen in real time. The 2 men were contemporaries on the London scene, and Beck never pretended Hendrix was anything other than unreachable. He said the album stopped him cold, not because it discouraged him, but because it showed him how high the ceiling actually was. Beck reflected that hearing Hendrix made him rethink his entire approach, not abandon it, but deepen it. That is the mark of a truly transformative record. It does not make other musicians quit. It makes them go back to the beginning and interrogate every assumption they have ever held. Hendrix himself once said, "I just want to do what I feel." Simple words, enormous consequences. Are You Experienced reached number 2 on the UK albums chart and broke the American market wide open. It has appeared on virtually every authoritative list of the greatest debut albums ever made. Beck named it Untouchable, and that word carries weight, coming from a man who spent decades pushing his own ceiling higher. Number 3. Mahavishnu Orchestra, The Inner Mounting Flame, 1971. A band that should not technically work walks into a studio and records something that still sounds like the future. The Mahavishnu Orchestra played in time signatures most musicians cannot count, at tempos most musicians cannot sustain, with an emotional intensity that had no business existing inside something so technically demanding. The Inner Mounting Flame sits at the exact intersection of jazz, rock, and Indian classical, not blending them politely, but colliding them at full force. The result feels simultaneously composed to the last detail and completely on the edge of collapse. That tension is the point. Jeff Beck cited this record as one that genuinely changed what he thought electric guitar could mean. The precision is absolute. The fire inside the precision is somehow even more absolute. What Beck recognized in McLaughlin was something he understood from the inside, the refusal to separate intellect from instinct. Most players choose a lane, technical or emotional, disciplined or free. McLaughlin refused that binary. He trained with extraordinary rigor and then performed as though the training had dissolved entirely into feeling. Beck spent his own career chasing exactly that quality, the moment where technique disappears and only expression is left. McLaughlin once said, "I wanted the music to be so powerful it would grab you by the throat." It did. Beck heard that ambition and recognized it, because he shared it. When the most demanding guitarist of a generation calls your album untouchable, you know the music hit exactly where it was aimed. Number 2. Sly and the Family Stone, There's a Riot Going On. Nobody expected Sly Stone to make a record that sounded like this. After the euphoric highs of Stand and a legendary Woodstock performance, what he delivered instead was There's a Riot Going On in 1971. Dense, murky, fractured, a record that sounded like it had been made inside the pressure itself. The euphoria was gone. What replaced it was something far more honest and far more uncomfortable. Critics did not know what to do with it at first, but the album reached number 1 on the Billboard 200, and over time became recognized as one of the most radical left turns any successful artist had ever made. Beck called it brave, and that is the right word. There is a specific courage required to follow mass success with something deliberately difficult, to hand an audience that loves you something that will make them uncomfortable, because the alternative is dishonesty. Sly Stone did not negotiate with that discomfort. Every distorted bass line, every buried vocal, every claustrophobic texture is a choice made without apology. Stone once said the album reflected exactly where his head was at the time, not where his audience wanted him to be, but where he actually was. Beck understood that refusal from the inside. He made his own career out of turning down the obvious move and taking the harder one. He heard a kindred stubbornness in this album and named it Untouchable for the same reason he was untouchable. It refused to be anything other than itself. Number 1, The Beatles Revolver, 1966. 4 musicians walk into Abbey Road and, over the course of one recording cycle, quietly dismantle the idea of what a pop album is allowed to be. Revolver does not ease you in. It opens with Taxman, sharp, biting, politically direct, and then moves through Indian classical influence, chamber strings, tape loops in reverse, psychedelic imagery, and a children's lullaby that sounds like the most unsettling thing on the record. No 2 songs operate in the same language, and yet the whole thing holds together with a coherence that feels inevitable. That coherence is not accidental. It is the product of 4 people operating at their absolute ceiling simultaneously and refusing to stop climbing. George Martin's production and the band's collective. Ambition pushed recording technology to its limit. Engineers had to be talked into techniques never tried before. Sounds were created that could not be replicated on stage, and the band did not care. They had decided the record was the thing. Beck grew up inside the same British musical explosion that produced the Beatles. He knew that world from the inside, but he said Revolver hit differently, not just as a collection of great songs, but as a document of what happens when creative ambition outpaces every expectation around it, including the expectations of the people making the music. Lennon once said, I never thought I was the greatest, but I thought the music was. That distinction matters. It is not ego. It is devotion to the work itself. Beck understood it completely. He held himself to an almost impossible standard, not out of arrogance, but out of reverence for what music could actually be. Revolver was his clearest example of that standard fully realized. The album reached #1 in the United Kingdom and has held one of the highest positions on the Rolling Stone 500 Greatest Albums list across multiple editions, a record critics keep returning to because it keeps rewarding the return. Beck did not name it #1 on a whim. He named it because it represents the standard he held everything, including himself, against. Make something this honest, make something this free, make something that does not sound like anything before it. The Beatles crossed that line and never looked back. Jeff Beck spent decades proving he understood why. 6 albums, 6 different worlds. And one guitarist who spent a lifetime listening as hard as he played. Les Paul gave Beck a language. Stevie Wonder gave him proof that feeling and invention belong together. Each record on this list points to something Beck understood better than almost anyone. That greatness in music is never an accident. It is a decision, made again and again, to go further than the obvious choice allows. These albums did not just influence Jeff Beck, they shaped the way he heard the instrument, and through him, they shaped everyone who came after. That is the quiet power of a list like this. It is not just about taste, it is about transmission. One player passing something essential to the next, and the next, and the next. If this got you thinking, drop your pick in the comments, the album you would call Untouchable. And if you are not subscribed yet, now is the right time. And if you think you really know Jeff Beck and the records that shaped him, the full quiz is waiting in the link in the bio. Find out how you score.